cup got stuff in it. We can see.
I mean, you can't see this if I go like this. Oh, and I think the YouTuber sees. Mhm. Hey, well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to another Hip Politics Happy Hour, digital happy hour. We are here live from our homes. Uh, we are here live from our homes. You have your co-host here, Mr. Cameron Calvin Trimble, aka Mr. Cameron Calvin, aka Mr. Hip Politics, and my wonderful. I gotta. You still haven't given me no AKAs, really. Like,
That's supposed to come from the heart. It's supposed to come from the person who starts it. Do
well,
better.
we have our wonderful for the happy hour, Helene Matthew. How you doing, Helene?
Hey, I'm good. It's good to see y'all again.
Well, we are talking the ending, finally, 100+ years, 200+ years too late, of the Confederate, or 100+ years too late of the Confederate flag. There was a really monumental historic piece of news that came out this week, that the governor, first Mississippi State, the Mississippi legislature, and then the governor signed an order to finally remove the Confederate symbol from the state flag, which is which I can't tell you is just a monumental day, not only for Mississippi but for the nation. It signals, hopefully, a true sea change that is a part and parcel with so many things that have been going on in our nation with racial justice demonstrations, so many other different Confederate statues coming down and other symbols being banned. The whole Black Lives Matter movement really kind of coming front and center for our nation. But this Mississippi one, I think, is probably the biggest move of them all so far. And we had to come, we've got together a nice little panel of wonderful Mississippians, either whether they're currently or former, but all born and raised, uh, different political insiders and professionals from Mississippi to kind of talk about this, what it means not only for the state, but for the nation, for Black people, for the country, um, and just see where the happy hour takes us. So, with that, we're going to kick it off. If everybody can kind of raise their glass. Yay. Cheers.
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 All right. Well, let me kick it off and just kind of start the conversation right where I kind of introed it. How are y'all feeling? Like, this is finally coming down. This symbol of what I think is a symbol of hate is finally coming down off of, officially off of the state flag. Um, but I haven't lived with that symbol my entire life. I haven't. It didn't even come into my consciousness until I was really studying. I mean, I knew what the state flags were, I guess, in grade school, but I think even really a full understanding may have been high school, maybe even college at Howard, and truly understanding the real impact and emphasis of it. But ladies like you all being from Mississippi, um, how are you feeling about this?
Well, I'll start. So I feel phenomenal. One, I think for like most of the folks on this call, I am a fourth generation Mississippian. And so being every woman up to date in my family on my mother's side has been born under that flag. Every woman that is alive today, born to my mom's side of the family, has been born under that flag. And when it came down on June 30th, which is actually my aunt's birthday, I think it meant so much to so many people. Like my mom and I were talking about it, and the reality of it is now, like, from that day forward, no other generations in Mississippi will be born under that flag. And I think, that means so much in so many ways, because I don't know about other folks who have flags that bear Confederate symbols, but for the folks in Mississippi, we are the 32nd largest state in the union. We are the poorest. I mean, we are 50 to 50 in terms of our median income wealth. And that is largely because our state has paid for 126 plus years homage to hatred. And, anyone who knows business, that doesn't attract business, that doesn't promote economic growth, it doesn't promote educational growth. And I mean, we hope, and Naomi and Timmy could probably speak to this, but like, growing up, I know in my hometown, we were segregated. Like, and that's a real thing when we talk about it, and people want to say like they can't believe it. But the reality is when you have an all Black public school and you have an all white private school, that is segregation by another name. And that was largely promoted by symbols of hate that flew over both institutions, one proudly and one not so proudly, but because of where we were in our country, that was a burden that we had to bear. And what we were taught, you know, during that time was not, we didn't think, I don't know, and I could be wrong, but like, I don't know our state song because it is even also Dixie, right? And for a lot of people, if you were Black in Mississippi, there are some parts of that story that you don't pay homage to because it is so hurtful and it's so divisive and has been that way for your family for generations. So on June 30th, that wasn't just a day for us to commemorate the life of my aunt, but it was also for us to commemorate to celebrate a new beginning. What it would mean for my children to, should I choose to have children and want them born in the state of Mississippi, they don't have to be born under that same flag, which has for so long carried so much hurt and so much harm for people.
So I'll jump in and just say, as someone who was born in the great state of Mississippi, has always made it very clear, yes, I love DC. DC is the city that really poured into me, but being born in the state of Mississippi and being able to claim that has been, an honor for me. But of course, as Joaquina so eloquently put it, just, being reminded of what some of the symbols of not just Mississippi, but of the South, and what that means in terms of people wanting to continue to honor their heritage, recognizing that that heritage is really steeped in being treasonous and not what it really means to be an American in this country. But knowing that that is slowly but surely being chipped away is something that does bring immense joy. I mean, it definitely is that reminder and that resounding sound of like the arc towards freedom. Like we're getting closer and closer to where we want to be, but also being reminded of the coded language that comes along with, the acknowledgement that comes with being accountable for what all of that is meant for people, but also being reminded that people are going to find other ways. And how do we make sure that we tell a historically clear and accurate story going forward so that those things, the history and all of the things that come along with that are also erased. So the idea of what it means to value Confederate soldiers. We recognize that that's a problem, but the idea of people saying, oh, well, we need to have this, that's a part of the history. Do we want to uphold history that has been, like Joaquina said, harmful? I have a really quick story about being on campus at Tougaloo College, the college that 3 of us attended, and having that moment of like feeling truly and definitively empowered. The chapel that sits on our campus was being restored, and the contractors that were coming onto campus would park alongside this hill, and you could see their pickup trucks. It was very clear that they were not melanated. And one of the contractors had a Confederate flag in his rear window. And we demanded that if you were coming onto our private institution's grounds, that you could not have that flag. Like that flag could not be displayed in any way. And to, truly be thoughtful about what it means to come onto those hallowed grounds. So this is something that, of course, is slowly but surely happening. But having that moment at, I think, maybe 19, 20 years old of being able to say, no, you are not going to fly that flag in space that respects us. It is something that is widespread and recognized.
Yeah, I would like to say one thing that I hope the viewers that are watching tonight and that will look at your replay, and even to you, Cameron, for hosting us, and Arlene for hosting us, is that this moment of taking down this flag and actually looking and wanting the flag to be taken down did not just start after and during this movement.
Exactly.
It has been throughout years. The member that I work for actually sued the state, along with many other people, sued the state in 1993. And that was my first where I can really remember a big battle about the flag. And I remember that my dad was a veteran, and on the veterans tags, the flag was prominently displayed on the stickers. And I remember looking at that and trying to make decisions on how can we value my dad, honor his service as a veteran on this car, but also how we can say we don't define ourselves with this flag. And many of us, from being a congressional staffer, in the House of Representatives, we took down that flag a couple of Congresses ago because we knew what it stood for, and we knew that it did not stand for the values of the House. And that actually happened under a Republican Congress, but it was led by a Democratic congressman from Mississippi that had to remind the House, especially in the wake of the shootings of the Charleston 9, that this flag has got to go. There have been several places where the flag has not been displayed. And I also want to say, growing up in Mississippi, Joaquina mentioned some of it. All of us are from different towns. Joaquina and I, our town population is actually the same, but the demographics are a little different. I grew up in a town that was pretty much 49.5, 49.5. Black, 49.5 white, and the type of segregation that we had, the type of the way that we view things, the way that we as in Black people where I grew up, did not have, I just heard of the term school choice a few years ago because I did not know what it was, because I did not have a choice of where I was going to school. I was going to go to the public school in Mississippi. But growing up, going down streets named Bilbo, playing a basketball team from Carrollton, Mississippi, where they go to school, and their school is named J.Z. George, who is one of the most polarizing people of the Confederacy. I mean, we think about Jefferson Davis, we think about Stonewall Jackson, but you also have people like J.Z. George. We go travel up and down our roads and see the Ross Barnett Reservoir, and then we have to sit down and hear about what Ross Barnett really did not want us to be. I am very honored that the flag came down. I'm very glad that we have so many generations of people that will not have to grow up with that flag. But I also have to look at what happened on the day the governor signed that legislation. I also have to look at who led the legislation. The leader of the Senate Democratic Caucus, my friend Derek Simmons from Greenville, Mississippi, a graduate of Jackson State University. The person that walked that flag into the museum, a Tougaloo College graduate, Judge Reuben V. Anderson, the first Black person to sit on the Mississippi State Supreme Court, and the first Black man admitted into the University of Mississippi School of Law, walked that flag into the museum, in the Mississippi Museum, where it belongs. Willie Simmons standing there, our first Black transportation commissioner, and looking back and seeing that this battle did not just come up in 2020, it was a long fight, but being very glad to know that there are people that can come on this podcast with you and discuss the Mississippi that we know, irrespective of the flag, and also how we were able to still communicate with people and let people know that we never stood for hate. And we know people that didn't stand for hate. And it was very hard though, taking people to Mississippi, taking them on a tour of my hometown, letting them, and I remember a friend of mine from New York came down and we went by the school and he was like, so you all expect people to learn in a building that has that on it? Having to be the social experiment. And I'm glad that we don't have to defend that, well, not necessarily defend that flag, but how to explain how we live in Mississippi and those symbols are all around us.
I guess I can follow up with you with your question, Cameron, and a lot of the stuff that you shared, Hope, So one of the things that I've always found to be interesting, especially when I'm in the Capitol and I'm taking in the artwork, that is, of course, beautiful, but seeing the perception on people's faces when they're Black and white. One group, you can see that there is a sense of pride. They feel emboldened because, you know, this is the work of their founding fathers. And then when you look at the Black visitors who come in, it's the complete different perspective where they're kind of like, no, you can see the slaves, you can see the indigenous people, like the way that we interpret history when we're going through these museums are two completely different things. So Hope, I'm happy that you said that this is something that has been long in the making, well before all of this has happened. But for me, I think it's important for people to understand how this contributes to the bigger picture in the long run. It's not just about symbolism. It's not just the flag. This is something bigger than that. So any one of you, can you expound how this contributes to strengthening or promoting progression in the Black community?
I would say that one of the things, as Joaquin mentioned when we first joined, is that when the flag was at issue, there was an economic issue.
Mm-hmm.
There were plenty of businesses, plenty of sports tournaments, things people did not want to associate themselves with that Confederate battle emblem. When people come to the Capitol, they look around, you see the statues in the Capitol. You also see, like, and sometimes even in the architecture, you can tell that this was built by slaves. Or you look and you say, well, you see and you see off to the side, there's a portrait of Hiram Revels, and you have to point it out and you have to explain who Hiram Revels was and who Blanche Bruce was. So those things are parts of history, and some things that are parts of our history are bitter. And some things we do not have to hold on to, and we do not have to promote. I think one thing with the flag coming down, I cannot just say that it's going to just promote so much unity in the Black community, but let's look at the underpinnings of what it is going to do. We're going to promote some different things to people from outside of Mississippi. We're going to be able to bring some more things in. We're going to be able to, our children are going to be able to learn without a hate-filled battle emblem over their heads every day. It's something psychological about that. When you're deciding that you're going to walk in somewhere and you don't have the Confederacy over you anymore. It's something psychological about not having to turn your back and not go somewhere because they have a Confederate symbol. But it makes things more welcoming, and it makes things more welcoming to people from outside of the state. This is the United States. You can go state to state. Interstate commerce is one of the backbones of America. It's something about being welcoming and doing more than just saying, hi, y'all.
Yeah.
It's your symbols. Symbols are meaningful. So I think it's going to be a unification, not even just in the state, but with people coming from the outside of the state going into the state.
Yeah, Herline, I think there are a couple of things there in your question that I think I want to underscore from Hope, but also make aware of people. So July 1st, 2020 was the first time that my parents were both able to go to work and be proud of where they're going to work, because the flag that represented so much oppression, hate, and degradation for Black people in the state of Mississippi was not present at their workplace. Right? And so when you talk about what does that really mean for Black people have always been a proud people. That flag coming down shows not only Mississippians, but the rest of the world that we are not losers. Those flags pay homage to losers, okay? My great grandfather fought in the Union Army. Okay, he was a part of the 52nd Cullen Infantry that fought in the Union War for our freedom, right? That means something. So the battle flag that was flown against those people that he was literally going to war with for his freedom is no longer flying over his descendants. That means a whole lot to a whole lot of people. And I have to take a moment and recognize the efforts of the people on the ground, not just the elected leaders, but also the community activists who leaned in heavily around that. A lot of them from Tougaloo, Rakia Lumumba, Anjanou Ellis. I mean, so many other folks. We had a number of folks from Upgrade, Mississippi, a number of folks from Black with No Tracer who were out there on the front lines fighting for the liberation of Black people, the liberation of thought of people in the state of Mississippi. And that means a whole lot to those people. When we talk about years, we talk about 1993. Then we talk about again in 2001 when it was a part of a referendum that was voted on and decided in the state, right? That was the opportunity for the voices of the people of Mississippi to be heard. The people of Mississippi at that time said no, they weren't ready to let go of that tainted part of the state's heritage until now, 19 years later, where we gravitated from art compositions to redesign the flag to now the flag coming down and be a mandated being put in place where there has to be a redesign, right? I think that means so much for so many people. I think about my brother who's 21, who's growing up in Mississippi. That means a lot to him to be able to ride down the road and knowing that the flag that flies, that represents the values of America, also values now that we can appeal to, that actually speaks to the greater senses of ourselves. That is a meaningful thing. And like for a lot of people who, for me, it kind of gives me a sigh of relief that I don't, it takes a little bit of the pressure off where we have to answer questions about what it was like growing up in Mississippi. It makes me feel like I was born in the 1920s when someone asked me, so what was it like growing up?
Yeah.
It's like they think I'm I got a civil rights story, right? Yeah. And I do though. Realistically, I do. But in the same vein, it was aggressive in a way because you kept having to make the case that we weren't bound and shackled. I had some freedom and some liberty to move around, but I do understand the ignorance in those statements, not ignorance in a bad way, just because people are often miseducated. And folks like us have a privilege that a lot of folks didn't have before. So when I think about my grandmothers who marched and, started NAACP branches and all the other things that, they were fighting not only for civil rights, but for liberation. Some people thought we're fighting for rights. Some people were still fighting to be liberated from the ideas of oppression and slavery, right? And so, for me, it was a momentous moment. I was really full. I didn't say as much as I wanted to because I think I was still trying to come to the realities that this was real now, right? And it's
very real.
This is something that we have reached a mark in our. This goes alongside the tale of the two museums that are in Jackson right now. It pays a humongous homage to those who have labored over this issue since 1993, since 2001, and also to 2020. So,
Dr. Harris.
I've been trying to get in here. It's kind of loud because the guy's working in the bathroom, so I'm in and out where he's doing something, retiling the floors. There was a leak. But my dad started teaching. Well, my dad was teaching when they started integrating schools in Macomb, Mississippi. I think it was called Berglund High at first. So for me, living in Mississippi, while the flag coming down is a start, we know that there's a whole lot more work to do because the flag can come down, but you still have that mindset. So for me, let's say going on job interviews, you see that flag and it becomes a matter of, I'm probably not gonna get this job. And historically, the Confederate flag is being used as a means of demonstrating power and dominance over nearly half the citizens of Mississippi. So to me, the actual Confederate battle flag and the state flag, they meant the same. They sent a message to where white men will always dominate, Black men and women will never have power, and no roles except subservience. So the flag, it was a representation reasserting power, unifying the state's whites who were divided politically, economically, and socially. So it was breathtaking. You know, my father passed away. So the things that are changing, and he's not here to see it, but you know, it's been a long time coming. So just like they've been trying to get rid of this flag for a long time now. I think Hope was talking about it, and they've always killed the idea of it. But I'm thinking about the people who've been out there protesting, how heavy the protest started after George Floyd, and Black Window Chase out there on the front lines. And it's like the people are getting so loud to where you can't ignore it. And as far as on the economic level, the flag was a liability. People were turning away from Mississippi. NCAA, I think recently, I can't think of the guy's name, but he was like, I'm not going to play in one of these schools if they still fly this flag. So it's going to be a good thing. I know a number of companies who didn't want to come in, business-wise, money. It's an opportunity to bring more money to Mississippi. So I'm excited about what's to come. And you look at how some of the southern states have been getting turned blue. And I think for me, it's just getting us to vote on that local and that local level. So I'm looking forward to what will happen with all the voices that are in place and making things move finally. You know, Mississippi is always last with everything, you know, catch it. And just looking at the women here from Mississippi, we represent Mississippi. I think about when I go places, conferences, I'm defending my research or I'm reporting my research somewhere. And they're like, you're from Mississippi and you dress like that? So they're thinking we wear overalls and straw hats and stuff like that. And the people are so misinformed about what's happening in Mississippi. So I'm really looking forward to see how things change now since we're changing the flag.
It's something that now that this is kind of happened in Mississippi, and Mississippi was like the last major state to actually have it on its state flag. But they still fly to like the Confederate flags in a lot of places in like Alabama, South Carolina, as like a secondary flag, and now they're starting to lower those. I think what was kind of ironic, but I guess not, because as we mentioned, it is an economic issue. It is an economic issue. Did you guys notice? I know you heard about like NASCAR banning it, which there's only like one black driver, Bubba Watson, who's on the main circuit. But it used to always, like, not that wasn't the main reason I didn't watch NASCAR. I mean, I've tuned into a race here and there, but it used to always like bewilder me that you could legit see that like TV cameras for the most part had moved away from like panning over that, so you didn't see it. But when you saw pictures of it, or I'm a big ESPN.com and sports person fan, so you'll see it in pictures, and it always blew my mind, like, that NASCAR was just, I guess they had made the economic equation that, like, if we take this away, we'll lose more people who would watch it versus what we would gain. But it's funny to me, the timing, in the sense that, is this what it took? And like, which makes me feel, I mean, again, I'm an outsider, so I'm looking in, it's like, it feels even a little less genuine. But as opposed to, all right, I guess the same way, like, everybody's throwing Black Lives Matter, every company and organization. So, I'm curious.
Because I had the opportunity to be born there, have cognitive memory of living in the state of Mississippi and leaving and then going back. So what Joaquin spoke to and what Dr. Harris spoke to in terms of like people thinking it's, you know, the backwoods of nowhere, dirt roads, all of those things. In my freshman year of college, recognizing that there were people who legitimately were still having separate proms. My father went to one of the prominent high schools in Mississippi in the 70s. And while he was in school, he served as the co-class president or SGA president with a white man. And, you know, however many years later, 20 some odd years later, when I'm in college in that same town and going to school with friends of mine who attended that same high school, while I'm there, people are saying, oh, well, you know, did y'all have separate proms? Asking me about here at home. And I'm thinking to myself, it's separate proms. Why would anybody do that? Like, why are separate proms even a consideration? Where up until like 2008 or so, there still were school districts that were having a white prom and a black prom. And I think as time progresses, while we don't think that, and I think Hope and Joaquin laid this out really well, This is not something that happened simply because of the death of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. This happened because of longstanding, unrelenting focus and drive to make sure that this symbol was something that we made sure we continue to raise our voices and say, this is not what we want. That may not happen immediately, but the fact that it has happened, that cannot be undone, right? The idea of if 20 some years ago, we were still having separate proms in the state of Mississippi by like officially, not by, oh, my parents want to pay for us to have a separate prom so we can have the music we want. So that was happening, but there also was the thing of there were school districts who were still being very segregated about the way they went about their work. And so what does it mean now that those things have come apart and now this is another notch in the belt of progress?
Yeah.
That's the best way, or the way that I've been looking at it as someone, again, who was there, remembers so much about it, left, came back, had that very transformational experience of having that, like living in Mississippi, being called the N-word for the very first time in my life, 18 years old, happened in the state of Mississippi. But those things being very true and it ringing true then and now, that the people that lived there always wanted to get as close as possible to liberation. And slowly but surely, we've chipped our way to that.
Yeah, I also think that it's incredibly difficult to reconcile witnessing someone's knee be on someone's neck for 8 minutes and 56 seconds, right? Or was it 36 seconds? 8 minutes and 30 seconds.
8 minutes, 46 seconds.
46. I have the 6 wrong. 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and not understand or not empathize with the struggle, right? That being a demonstration of the embodiment of what it's like to live your life with someone's knee on your neck, right? And I think what you witnessed with NASCAR and what you witnessed with so many other corporations was their reconciliation, the genesis of their reconciliation with the guilt and the penance that needs to be paid for the original sin of slavery in this country, right? I think that's what we witnessed in that moment. When you talk about how we got from there to the removal of the Mississippi state flag, I want to remind folks that it was almost 9 years ago to the day, right? June 26, 2011 was when a Black man in Mississippi was, he was drugged, he was attached, he was roped and drugged down the streets of Mississippi by white teens, right? That was 9 years ago. So yeah, it made mainstream media for just a few moments, and it allowed people to gloss over what the realities of hate really were in this country. George Floyd was a new concept. You know, people want to start dating this back to Trayvon Martin, but I remind folks that it was actually James Beard Jr. whose murder we have to remember, right? Like in that level of hate crime that was administered into his neck. And then to witness, you know, death after death after death after death after death after heinous death of Black people in this country, and the violence that is committed against our bodies and our beings every single day. So yes, it's been beyond time for that flag to come down. But what it really, really meant in that moment is that when we talk about James Byrd and when we talk about James Anderson, all of those things combined, you know, led to this moment. And it's also, again, to Dr. Harris's point, it was the war cry of the people who have been unrelenting on the issues of race and racial disparities in this country. The fight about the flag coming down wasn't just about, you know, George Floyd or Craig Anderson or James Anderson or James Beard, but it was also about econ inequality. It was about poverty, like severe poverty in the Mississippi Delta. It's about places in Mississippi counties that still have brown water or no water. If you want to talk about lead in water, how about no water at all? Or what about feces in water? You're talking about tremendous inhumane conditions that people still have to undergo in this country today. And it's for no other reason than that systemic racism has been baked into the culture of this country. And yet Mississippi is a poster child for that, but that happens across this nation. And I think this is the beginning of that change and realizing that change, coming to terms with that change in real time.
I hope it is.
Yeah, and You want to go ahead, Cameron, or you want me to finish?
No, Herlene was gonna throw something else out there.
Yeah. So my next question is something that I've been seeing a lot of when it pertains to allyship and how we can pull other demographics into aligning with us to overcome so many of these, instances of brutality and, stopping just all of the crazy things that we continue to see happen. But one thing that I will say is I have also heard a few people who've expressed exhaustion, where if you don't get it, you're not going to get it because you don't care. So, this act of, oh my gosh, we didn't know, is it for the moment? So for that, my question is, are you a proponent for allyship, or is this the Black plight and we just have to take this on our own? And is it our responsibility to educate our white counterparts, our Latina counterparts, our Asian counterparts? How do you guys feel about allyship?
Well, you're talking to three people that were educated at the birthplace of allyship. I'll just say that. No, seriously, we three of us went to Tougaloo College, and Dr. Harris is educated at Jackson State University. And I would say Mississippi, the way we think of it, and we've discussed it here, and I even said I was from.
Can I quickly interject? I did research that the first time the flag was brought to legislation, it was voted against 2-1 amongst the voters.
It was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was, but that was when it was brought to the voters.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just discuss for you allyship right quick.
Mm-hmm.
In Tougaloo College, where we were educated, and actually Jackson, Mississippi, and Mississippi as a whole, I've discussed a lot of things about being from a segregated town. Naomi mentioned segregated proms. We didn't have segregated proms. We also had we didn't have two homecoming queens, but we would always have a majority representative, a minority representative. However, I will say this one thing about Mississippi: there have been allies along the way, especially during the civil rights movement. And if you have not heard of her, tonight you will. Joan Mullen.
Mm-hmm.
She came to Mississippi. She's the first white member of Delta Sigma Theta, but she came to Mississippi as a freedom rider.
So let's just say, so can I just say that's beyond.
But I was about to go back to other stuff too.
No, but that's beyond allyship.
Could you repeat her name one more time? Because I have a feeling that this is probably a lot of people's first time hearing that name.
Her name is Joan Mullen.
Yeah, well, Joan Trumphire Mulholland. Her name, but she was Mueller at the time, but it's Joan Trumphire Mulholland.
Okay. And like Naomi said, it does go beyond allyship, but I do want to let you know that there are people that have worked closely. Tougaloo College was a haven for survivors of the Holocaust that came to Mississippi to actually be professors. We had Holocaust survivors on our campus up until very recently when they died. They actually served on our campus and were able to tell those stories. There also is a population in Greenville that we have had that type of collaboration in the state. We've had that type of collaboration. When it comes to the allyship, and getting people to understand and people to work. I do think that it has grown in time. It has to take time. I will say that going back and forth with someone that decides that he wants to maintain his Confederate heritage, or decides that because his family was mistreated when Italians came to the United States, he has an equal civil rights story as someone that whose mom had pipe bombs thrown at her in the 1960s. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to really stop there and go with, because allyship is something that's proactive.
Mhm.
Something you have to want to be an ally. You can't go out here and decide, oh, I'm about to recruit and convince and convert people.
Yeah, and I would also say, here's the thing. Racism is a public health issue. Point blank period. So when you start talking about public health and public safety, then it becomes all of our issue, right? You want to talk about crime in communities, you want to talk about low incomes, you want to talk about poor education. All of that is cyclical, right? Do you want the doctor in your hospital receiving a third world education? No, you don't. So when you talk about parity, when you talk about economic parity, we talk about educational parity, opportunity gaps, wages, all of that. That comes back full circle. So we all should have a vested interest in ending racism in this country, and that does look like allyship, but it also looks like people who are willing to be your accomplices in the work. So, and that doesn't mean that you come in trying to, impose on us what you think and how you think we should operate. Sometimes you got to take, to Hope's point, take a minute, sit down and listen so you could learn something too, because we've been doing this for a while and we know what moves people in our community, but we also need the collaborative efforts and collaborative understanding in that work. You mentioned when the flag came up to vote to the voters and it was outvoted 2-1. You also have to talk about the history of voter suppression in places like Mississippi. Until Chevy v. Holder was introduced and the Supreme Court made that really just decimating ruling out of Shelby County, Alabama, you made places like Mississippi, who had previously had the protections of the Department of Justice, you took away so much of what that could really look like. And you're also assuming, and not you specifically, Herlene, but people often assume that because in a place like Mississippi, where we are 43 or 47% Black, don't quote me on, my number's been running crazy for me the last couple of days, but we are significant. We have a significant Black population within our state, majority of which live in the 2nd Congressional District of the state of Mississippi. When you talk about infrastructure, technology challenges, when you talk about mobility issues, health issues, and a host of other challenges that we experience due to systemic racism, then you have cause and effects for a 2-1 to vote. You also have, in some instances, where people were working for businesses that wouldn't even let them off to go vote when that vote was being heard and that vote was on the ballot. So when you start talking about voter suppression and voter oppression, you're going to run into issues where you have a 2-1 vote. We know that in the state of Mississippi, before the 2010 census, we actually had a majority Black legislature. After 2010, after the census, we had reapportionment. We lost so much representation. They redrew our lines. They put the majority of all the Black people in the state in one congressional district. It was split between CD1 and CD2. They took away an entire congressional district. So you're talking about a whole lot of things. You can't just throw. I mean, I know you didn't know that, Herlene, but like when
No. I'm literally just giving you the numbers and the common misconceptions.
I want to also inform the viewers, because I don't want folks to walk away and say, well, where were Black folks? Because we have such a significant Black population. The record needs to reflect the challenges that existed when that vote was actually brought to the floor.
Right. And we weren't even 40 years out from even having the right to vote.
Exactly.
I know I'm kind of going back a little bit, but Cameron was talking about NASCAR and how it didn't feel genuine. And to me, I was just thinking about that was a marketing move. I know you talk about the guilt, but I think it was a marketing move. I think the Kentucky Derby has been a marketing move. And what they're doing is they're capitalizing by supporting Black folks. And now they have the Black dollar and the Black crowd. That was what I wanted to say about that. And I was trying to get in there about the segregated proms. I went to Macomb High School, and while it wasn't officially a segregated prom, you know what the deal was. I mean, they could come to our prom, but they had something called a winter formal. And I think Clarksdale actually had the segregated prom somewhere. Could have been Morgan Freeman's high school or something like that. I can't remember, but I wanted to put that in here about the segregated proms in Mississippi and in Macomb.
Well, I wanted to, because we're coming up on the hour.
That was quick.
That was super quick. This is a heated issue. But something that I think that has also been happening before this. I mean, it actually, to its credit, it's been happening a little bit before the brutal murder of George Floyd and all the protests that have since sparked over the last month plus. But something that has happened, I would say, even more at a higher rate, and now Agent Orange is pushing back hard with executive orders. But I see them as inextricably tied. Is the removal and the defacing, and more so the removal of so many Confederate statues as being like they're even a more ubiquitous symbol that exists of the Confederacy, of losers, of uh, slavery, of just trying to put black people down, of racism. And I think it's come out a lot more recently in terms of news and so forth, but I don't know if everybody knows it. Like so many of those didn't like just jump up right after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the Civil War. Those things were purposely put in there in the 20s, and then even as recently as the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where as kind of almost a big middle finger to black people, to the civil rights movement. And when people say, "Oh, these are about our heritage and history," and it's like we don't. I mean, technically, the British came over here. We don't have a bunch of statues up to them. Like we don't have. It just feels so like the arguments for keeping them, and then I just kind of throwing out there what how Trump, as much as he claims I'm not racist and so forth, like how he's doing so many things with like the blindest of eyes and the biggest of like I don't care what you think, with this whole executive order on like fully prosecuting people who deface or destroy monuments, calls for 10-year prison sentences. So briefly, as we kind of come to a close, I'd like everybody to go around, make sure you introduce yourself. Well, give me your brief thoughts on what on A, do you think all these Confederate statues should come down, and just how you feel like that should play out, and then also make sure you introduce yourself so that people can know who you are and how to follow you. Naomi.
Sure. So Naomi Shelton, Director of Community Engagement for the KIPP Foundation. So to answer your question, well, let me say this. Also a proud fourth generation graduate of Tougaloo College. Like I said, born in Mississippi, raised in DC. And that will always, Mississippi will always be my home. The idea that Trump is taking these extreme measures to do ridiculous things and to prove a point is, we know what it is. We all know that it's him being petty. We know that those are supposed to be symbols of we still have power, but recognizing that the Daughters of the Confederacy made an explicit campaign to make sure that not only these monuments were erected, but that history books that went into classrooms and went before children, that stuff was that they were the Fox News of their time. They were the ones that were perpetuating the ideas of hate and symbolism and making sure that they were continuing to push that narrative in people's faces, so that rote memory would be like the knee-jerk reaction of what people in the South believe to be true. So what does it look like for those of us who are in movements now to be a part of the process of unraveling that, but then also being very, very clear about what does it mean when you take those statues down, because those statues were not erected as a way to pay homage, but to also stoke fear within Black people. So how do we, one, unravel that, but also be very clear about what do things like Juneteenth mean to Black people? Not only Juneteenth, but what does it mean to celebrate Emancipation Day here in DC? The idea of the bookends of what that meant. What does it mean for us to be very honest to talk about Reconstruction in this country and the idea of all the gains that we made and how all those things were dashed by the death of Lincoln, which whether he freed the slaves or not, that being a turning point in our country and people wanting to go back to what it was at that point in time. So how do we think about, as we unravel, building up people's memory and their rote memory and their knee-jerk reaction of Black history being American history, Black people being the cornerstone of this country, Black people digging their heels in and saying, we built this thing for free, so we're not going to leave. Our history is no longer something that is in the background, but it should be at the forefront of what we talk about when we talk about this country.
Well, I'll just piggyback off of Naomi because I think she brought up some really valid points about white women's role in white supremacy and the preserving of white supremacy and white heritage in this country, and how that has been a part of why we have been so and remain so stagnant as a nation. We cannot truly call ourselves the greatest nation on earth and continuously pay homage to losers, right? They lost. And I think when you start talking about images and statues and things of that nature, you know, the visceral reactions that you are met with when you start challenging that privilege is almost it's almost like it's very anti-religious in the sense that they treat those statues as though they are idols. And I think the coming down of those items is biblical in their own sense. I think it speaks more with bodies deciding that those statues have to come down, speaks to more of who we aspire to be and who are we willing to let go of in this country. And I'm happy to see that so many of us, this has become a multicultural movement. And for the first time in a long time, I believe Black people who have been advocating for Black people in this country don't feel alone in their pursuits. We too often have found that in every movement that happens, whether it is children being stuck on the border or whether it is LGBTQ rights, Black people always go to the defenses of other people, but very few people show up for our humanity. And this moment has really spoken to what it means to be human. In American in this country, not just an American in the sense of you being born here, but now you're able to salute that flag and actually really, really believe in the principles that you've been taught to admire and to hold claim to as a citizen in this country. So as it relates to the statues that still remain, I stand by these words when I say take the motherfuckers down, because they don't mean shit to nobody but people who want to live in the past. Pardon my French on that, but don't pardon my sentiments on that, because I believe that it's too long, man. Too many of us out here are working. We're leaving blood on the line every single day in these jobs. It is not easy to show up in anti-Black cultures and work environments and still perform at your optimal and still do it on behalf of people who don't even understand your sacrifice. And so when it comes down to something as simple as a statue, a hollow statue that's sitting in somebody's courtyard, I say take the motherfuckers down.
I agree.
Dr. Pierce, go, Dr. Pierce.
I agree with. I agree with taking them down. For me, it's been more of a matter of, I don't care about you telling the story, just make sure you tell the whole story. So for every Confederate statue that you have, a presentation of what we've done as a people for it. And if you're not gonna do that, which we know they're not gonna do, go ahead and take it down. And it makes me think about, we were just talking about the lawsuit the lawsuit against the mayor of DC. And we were talking about how if they ruled in favor of the plaintiff, if Mayor Bowser appealed it, it goes to federal court, becomes DC jurisdiction, Supreme Court, and then one of Trump's judges rules in favor of the plaintiff, and it becomes a ground remove displays anyway. That became a matter of just a court case of trying to get it down. So even I think with the flag or the statue. So for me, yeah, go ahead. Just listen to her talk about the flag. The moves that they're making now, taking down the statues, the flags, the things that are happening, the changes that are taking, that's making me, and some people start doing things the right way.
Make sure you introduce yourself. You were breaking up a little bit, but I think we got it. But please introduce yourself. Oh, did we lose you? You froze. No, it was getting good to the end. All right, I'm gonna try to get you back on in a second. Hope, you want to get that question?
Sure. I would like to thank you so much for having us on here, and thanks for having so many different Mississippians on here. I wouldn't mind having a part two, because there's some stuff we still hadn't got to yet.
I just got the word from a bunch of I just got the word from a couple other folks. My boy.
Yeah, and we had it's a lot we hadn't touched on, and we need a little representative from Northeast Mississippi, because in the Gulf Coast, because we Black people in Mississippi are definitely not a monolith. We have a lot of varying needs and a lot of things that are very different from our communities. But one thing I would say is statutes, symbols, those flags, things like that, they do matter. There are a lot of people in my demographic that want to say, well, they're not going to apologize for their ancestors, or they're not going to back down from history, which, if that's your belief, I would say this: I feel like the daughters of the Confederacy, the sons of Confederate veterans, the people that privately raised or put money into putting those statues up, you got your money's worth, let's take them down. But I also want your viewers to know this, especially with the people that are here on this program tonight, that we are still going to do the work. And when I say we, I mean the organizations that we're in, the people that we partner with, our alma maters, people that we know both in and outside of the state. There is income inequality in Mississippi. We do have healthcare. A lot of our healthcare problems come because we do not accept Medicaid expansion in Mississippi. Where I live, there is an EPA Superfund site, and we have a huge problem with environmental racism in Mississippi. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't want anyone viewing this program tonight to think that flag coming down and maybe a statue coming down from this city or that city or here and there is the end for us, because we are now on jobs and economics. The students of Mississippi that took that flag down at their schools, none of the public universities flew that flag. They were already on their way looking at jobs, inequality, economics, healthcare disparities, things of that nature. So you have people on the ground doing the work. And just like all eyes were on Mississippi earlier this week as that flag came down, needs to stay that way, because there is going to be a revolution in the state. You have people there that are advocating for all these things, and it's not going to happen overnight. It isn't. But there are a lot of smart people on the ground, and a lot of smart people that have a very, very vested interest in the state. And you got people that are, like you said, allies, people that have a vested interest in the state that are really going to look out for the state. And Mississippi is going to change, and it's going to be a change for the positive.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Hope Goins. I'm a congressional staffer, native Mississippian. I'm from Grenada, Mississippi. Educated at Tougaloo College.
And Dr. Harris, you didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, I am Tiny Harris. I'm an environmental scientist.
Hold on. One second. You got muted. Say it again. Unmute yourself.
My name is Tiny Harris. I am an environmental scientist here in the DC area from Macomb, Mississippi.
All right. Yeah, Joaquin, you didn't introduce yourself either.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wakenya Clanton from Canton, Mississippi, well-educated at the Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi. I serve as a senior advisor to the chairman, right, D-Lou. I work for the chairman of the Democratic National Committee as his senior advisor, and I am a vet of Capitol Hill. So.
True. And Harleen, you want to take us out?
Yeah, thank you all so much again for joining us. Hope, Naomi, Tammy, Taime. Hold on, you kind of went out. for a little bit.
Who, me?
No. Why Kenya?
Why Kenya?
Why Kenya? I was so close. Thank y'all so much for joining us. You guys are absolutely dynamic. We always like to end off with a little bit of hip hop contribution. Cameron, I know. The last thing I was listening to, like we did for the last two sessions, was Will Smith's "Summertime" at Cameron's recommendation, since that was what he was listening to, and it goes with the vibe of the season. So,
yeah, I'm curious. Is there any song y'all getting you through right now? I'll throw out there.
I was listening to Big Crit's new album, and he has this track called. Yeah, see, you ain't on it.
Not the one with energy, like a new album?
No, it's a new one. Victorious is the track that I just listened to. I'll send it to you. But he dropped it probably like a couple weeks ago. But Victorious is. What'd you say, Dr. Harris?
Crit was here.
Oh yeah, Crit was here.
Crit was here.
Yep. Crit was here. That's the album. And Victorious is a dope track. If you haven't heard it, you need to hear it. I actually did a little clip in my IG story today. So it's dope. Y'all should check it out.
Oh, what you listening to?
You know what? I ain't really been listening to much. I've been trying to tune some stuff
out. I've been listening to, because I know, because I'm a title guy. I have Spotify, podcasts are on Spotify, but I only really listen to my music through Tidal. And so now they've been doing what's your most listened to of last year? What's your most listened to of last month? My number one of last month was a song that wasn't even out the whole month. It's called Other Side of America by Meek Mill. It's like a protest song. He comes in with like a Trump quote when Trump's talking about what do black people have to lose? And the beat is banging. He got a little bit of message and he's still a little swag talk, because I need some of that I need some of that energy as I continue to stay motivated but still in the house all day. But this platform gives me so much energy as well, and talking to great people like yourselves. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, shout out to Mississippi.
Indeed.
In my cricket letter.
Good job, everyone. No tongue tied.
Right. That only works in the States.
Yeah. But yeah, thank y'all so much. Have a good night, y'all.
All right, good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having us.
And hold up.